I wouldn't be running if I didn't think, and in fact know, because I've worked in the State House, I've worked in a very high level at the State House, and I've seen how money is spent and how it's wasted, that the money is there. The problem is, again, coming back to what we've been talking about all night, the problem is it's not coming back here. We shouldn't be fighting in Holliston over who pays to send their kid.
Okay, but you are fighting, Dan, and I want to get back to the buses. So you do nothing then?
I'm not running for superintendent of schools. I'm running for state representative to go up there and fight like heck to make sure that cities and towns aren't put in this situation. And it's an inevitable result, this situation, of a way of thinking on Beacon Hill. And frankly, Carolyn said something last week in Holliston where she said she had a business background, and she said, I'll tell you this, if you spend all your time watching your dollars and watching your receipts and expenditures, you're going to miss opportunities. I'll tell you, my point of view is taxpayers want someone watching their dollars. Dan,
we got a lot of ground to cover, so
no.
I'm gonna say, because if you don't want to answer the question, fine, I respect that, but we should move on.
Okay, Michelle, you're up next.
Okay, we'll go back to economic growth.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of talk about bringing new businesses in, and a lot of talk by some of non-residential revenues being the solution to towns' budget problems. What do you think is the ideal mix of commercial versus residential taxes?
I think that should go to Dan first this time.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that there's an ideal mix of commercial versus residential taxes. I do know that if we do not attract and retain employers, businesses, that we will continue in the spiral that we're in. And frankly, I noted an article a couple of weeks ago about how Holliston is using state tax credits to try and lure businesses to an industrial area that we have in town. The problem is, as they're doing that, the state is raising taxes on business broad-based. So if you're saying to a business, if you're doing recruiting, we're going to put some money in this pocket, but the state's going to reach out and take it right back out of the same pocket, you're not going to bring business to Holliston if you can't bring it to the state. And frankly, the fact that I was in the State House at a high level, and I worked on attracting business to Massachusetts, and that is done primarily with monetary incentives to come here. And all the monetary incentives in the world don't matter if we're raising taxes broad-based on business, if we're raising healthcare assessments, which we just did a couple of weeks ago, if we're enacting new regulations that are going to send energy costs sky high. We've raised, in the last couple of months, taxes on business in this state by almost $1 billion. And I'll tell you something, the recruiters for North Carolina for business are putting that in their written materials.
Ms. Dykema, same question.
I think each community, the question was about the ideal balance between business and residential, and I think that's very much a community decision. I think each community needs to decide what they think is the appropriate balance. What I'm hearing from people that I've spoken with is that we need more. We are, all the communities in this district are predominantly residential, although we have certainly seen in certain areas of the district more growth recently than in others. I think the challenge there is, as a state representative, to work closely enough with the individual communities to understand what their goals are, and then being able to support those goals at the State House so that each community still can control its own destiny but take advantage of the opportunities that it sees available to it.
Okay. Jim, I think you're up next.
No, I think I am. I'd like to at least start by addressing this one to Dan, just because Dan does have experience in government. You did work in the State House. You worked with Mitt Romney, with Kerry Healy. You now work, I think, with Bill Weld, right? Yeah, I've seen that on your website. And everybody knows pretty much who those folks are and may have their feelings about them, you know, good or bad. But I was struck by some information on your website, and I'll quote part of it. Dan was privileged to serve as a top aide to then Chairman Jim Nicholson, traveling with the that's Republican Committee National Chairman Jim Nicholson, going to nearly every state in the process, gaining an up-close look at the political process at every level. Evidently, he was kind of a mentor to you, and you probably know where I'm going with this. But Jim, not too long after that, was asked to step down as chairman, and I think the phrase used was because he was a liability to the party. But not enough of a liability that, because he was a tremendous fundraiser, that President Bush appointed him in 2005 as U.S. Secretary of Veterans Affairs. 2 years later, he resigned after the, pretty much in the wake of the scandal about substandard conditions at Walter Reed and the loss of a laptop with millions of veterans' records. Would you still consider him a mentor?
Absolutely. Jim Nicholson is one of the best men I know in the world, and I'll tell you something. I don't recall that phrase being used, that he was a detriment to the party. He was a fantastic chairman. He raised a lot of money, and the party won a lot of elections. And he's a profoundly decent man. I'm a little bit puzzled as to what that has to do with this race for state representative, but I'll tell you something. I would never say a bad word about Jim Nicholson. He's a decorated Vietnam veteran, served with distinction, and did as good a job as someone could do at the Veterans Administration in incredibly tough times with short resources and a massive, obviously, obligation for that agency. And so, no, I absolutely consider him a mentor and a friend, frankly.
Very good, and I consider that a good answer. And I'd like to follow up with kind of the same kind of in the same vein. You're a Republican.
Yes,
Carolyn's
sir.
a Democrat. A Massachusetts Republican is almost an oxymoron, as you almost said yourself.
Or at least an endangered species.
Exactly. Now, Mrs. Dykema told a correspondent for the Globe back in July that she would be more effective on Beacon Hill than a GOP lawmaker, reasoning a Democratic candidate would have the advantage in the State House simply because they would get the support of their programs from other Democrats. I'd like you both to kind of respond to that and give your points on.
Sure. I'm happy to respond to that. I read that and I thought to myself, I wonder when I'll have the opportunity to respond to that. First of all, I think the person we're running to replace has given lie to the notion that a Republican cannot do a great job representing this district, or any district, frankly. Representative Luskoko's done a great job. He's a friend of mine and he's supporting me. But frankly, I think the problem at the State House, if you come right down to the core of it, is we have got far too many people of the same party supporting each other's programs. And they're doing it literally, it sounds like a cliche, but they're literally doing it behind closed doors. They're taking our tax dollars, going behind closed doors, supporting each other's programs, and saying, we know we have $1 billion projected deficit, and what we're going to do about that is we're going to go behind closed doors and we're going to support each other's programs and come out and say, we just tacked $220 million on top of that billion. Thank you very much. A Republican, and this is real nuts and bolts, but a Republican comes into the State House, and because by rule you have to have 2 members of each party, of the minority on each committee, a freshman Republican is immediately on the most influential committees in the legislature. A freshman Democrat has to sit on the the subcommittee for toenail clippings for 10 years and support other leadership programs in order to work their way up the ladder and get to a place where they can have some serious influence.
Are we making any money on those toenail clippings?
You know, if we could, I'd sit on that committee.